Attorney, so I guess the first question really is ano po yung for the people who don't understand this, ano po yung ibig sabihin nun, and what does the WESM actually do, and is this a good idea to suspend it for now?
Okay, medyo technical nga po ang WESM. WESM stands for the Wholesale Electricity Spot Market. The name, in a way, holds the key to understanding what this is. It is a market, palengke, para sa kuryente. All generators in the Philippines connected to the grid are required to offer their capacity to this system, to this platform, and that's also where we call the stacking happens. So mula sa pinakamura hanggang sa pinakamahal para mapuno yung lahat ng pangangailangan natin, those are all stacked in the WESM, and those plants are dispatched usually according to that merit order that we call. So all the power that goes to our houses are first stacked in accordance with that stacking order or merit order in the WESM.
So attorney, ibig sabihin yung mga prices ng ating kuryente ay diyan dinidesisyonan?
Theoretically, Sir Ronald, kasi po we need to understand also, and this is where the nuance comes in. That sets the price for the market, but what actually goes to our bills do not necessarily reflect what's set in the market, because utilities, distribution utilities, and electric cooperatives are also allowed to contract for their own power. So where they enter into what we call bilateral contracts. So pag nangontrata sila ng kuryente, kahit na yung kakontrata nila sinabi 2 piso, tapos nag-offer sa market ng halimbawa 4 pesos or 3 pesos, ang sisingilin sa atin 2 piso. Pero kung nangkontrata sila, kung ano man yung nasa kontrata nila, yun yung sisingilin po sa atin. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if the WESM is low or high, that we get to, as consumers, that we get to pay those bills. Only those volumes that are bought by the utilities supplied to us, that were obtained directly from the market, not out of contract, are priced according to the market.
Ano kaya magiging impact niyan? Bakit siya sinuspende ng yung trading? Bakit sinuspende? Kasi we understand it's to stabilize yung energy cost and supply.
Opo.
Tama ba yung ganyang move?
Yun din po yung gusto nating Opo, yun din po yung gusto nating I think ipapaliwanag ng ERC, because they scheduled also public consultations on these draft rules, because it looks like it's an anticipatory measure, so that the prices will not increase. So normally market suspensions happen. That has happened even before. Usually during the summer months, if we don't have enough supply, the market is suspended because there's what we call under generation or lack of reserves. So the market is suspended in those situations. This one is a bit different. So I think ERC will be explaining how this can happen, how they envision prices to be determined. Kasi po, yung pinost din nila na draft for public consultation, dun pa lang nakalagay kung paano i-compute yung pricing. But the suspension is already in effect. So medyo yun po yung tricky situation natin.
Ma'am, that's what I was wondering about may pagbabanggit kasi doon na under the proposed scheme, coal plants, which account for mga 50 to 60% I think of our power mix, will be paid at a fixed rate. I'm not sure what that means. Not gas plants based on contracted prices, renewables under administered pricing, preferential dispatch. Could you guide us through what these mean?
And how it will affect our
power bill.
Not only consumption, but power bills.
Power bills.
Yes. Actually, sirs and ma'ams, I think ultimately that's what counts, right? How will this affect our power bills? The amounts that we will pay at the end of the month or the beginning of the following month. Especially because, as I think I mentioned earlier, distribution utilities generally contract for their requirements. About 80% of the power supplied to us as consumers are already covered by contracts. Only about 20% is contracted from the market. So what Sir Ed mentioned earlier, in the draft
the fixed
resolution
rate, for example,
by ERC. Yeah. It's also, I think, something that ERC will explain, because why do we need to, for example, fix the price for coal contracts when, for example, a coal contract is fully contracted? Halimbawa po, yung isang coal plant, binenta na niya yung kontrata, yung planta niya, yung production niya sa isang distribution utility or electric cooperative at 4 pesos, for example. The draft talks about a 6 peso fixed rate. Eh di medyo lugi po tayo doon pag naka 6 pesos siya doon pero doon sa kontrata 4 pesos, 'di ba? So dapat 4 pesos lang yung ipapasa sa atin. So medyo doon din po yung questions. But I think ERC will be prepared to explain this side. Yun pong sa preferential dispatch on RE, that's also a question, because a lot of our REs are result from either the feed-in tariff or the green energy auction program, where their rates were already set, resulting from that DOE contracting or auction exercise. So will this now supplement or supplant those auction prices, and will the administered price be acceptable to them, or medyo kailangan pong sagutin yon. Nat gas, nakalagay po dun sa draft, nat gas will be paid according to their contract.
Contracted
How
prices.
come it's only nat gas that will be paid according to their contracts? So I think all these things will need to be sorted out so that we can have a clear picture moving forward, and also until when this administered pricing will be in place. Normally po kasi yung suspension may end date or may conditions to show when that end date would be. I think that will also need to be explained.
Ma'am, do I get you right, ma'am, na most of the power that we use do not go through WESM? Tama ba? 80% ata are long-term contracts, meaning that's most of what we have right now. However, WESM pa rin still has a huge impact, I think, on the pricing of what we use.
Meron pong, everything goes through WESM for that stacking. But in terms of pricing, it's the contract that prevails over the WESM.
Which means,
so to the extent...
Which means, in short, kahit pa isuspend yung WESM, that's not going to trickle down to consumers very much anyways, because 20% lang yung market.
Unless po ang intention nito is to supervene the contracts, although I don't see that here, except for unless that's why I said it needs to be explained, because the administered price for coal contracts, for example, that's 6 pesos. Does that mean this now prevails over the contracted price? It's not really clear.
Pero, attorney, wala bang quotation do sa contracts na halimbawa, nagkaroon ng ganitong gera sa Iran, no? At naka-index ang price ng coal sa gasoline. Meron ba quotation sa contract na pwedeng magbago yung presyo? Or talagang mananatiling yung contract ay sagrado, hindi yan magbabago?
Nakaukit na.
Kahit merong gulo, kahit may shortage, kahit ano. Para maunawaan ng mga tao na bakit tataas o mananatili yung presyo ng kanilang kuryente.
Apo. Normally po yung contract sagrado. Hindi lang po dahil for the sake of having the sanctity of the contract, but it's meant to also protect the consumers. For example, kung ang contract nakasabi 5 pesos lang yan, kahit pa tumaas ng kung magkano yung sa merkado, protected yung consumers na hanggang 5 pesos lang ang sisingilin sa kanya. Some contracts do have what we call contract reopeners, but it's not blanket. Hindi po yan required sa lahat ng kontrata, or hindi yan nakikita sa lahat ng kontrata.
Pero I don't think that the government will, in this case, be able to take over those contracts.
Yeah.
The maraming legal issues yan. Even though I understand quasi-regulatory body naman talaga ang ERC. But I imagine that will be up against a lot of legal challenge.
I think all these things will, it's good that ERC scheduled the public consultation, I think very soon, I think tomorrow or Monday, because I think these are the things that need to be sorted out so that we know that we are proceeding on the basis of solid legal footing, right? We know that there are instability going on in the world, but we need to still observe what institutions are made for, which is to keep a solid ground on how things should be done.
Attorney, linawin ko lang ha, by way of managing expectations, kasi itong announcement na to, inaasahan ng mga tao, mate-temper yung kung sakasakali, yung pagtaas ng kuryente. Tama ba yung expectation na yun or it's not a guaranteed? Hindi siya actually, we cannot directly expect yung cause and effect na yan.
Opo. Siguro po nasa pagpapaliwanag ng ERC or ng Department of Energy kasi ang sinasabi din dito ng ERC, this is upon the recommendation of the Department of Energy. Siguro po kung nasa magpapaliwanag na itong presyo na nilagay dito sa administered price, kahit nasa kontrata yung presyo mo, walang halaga yon, ang gagamitin mo administered price, then we achieve that goal. But we need to sort out, as I think Regina mentioned, the legal implications of that, of supplanting the administered price over the contract price. Because normally, it just supplants the market price. So, we need to, I think, medyo mag-abang po tayo ng pagpapaliwanag.
Attorney, almost 2/3 ng ating electricity is coal-based. Sa international market ba, tumataas din ang coal? Naapektuhan ba sila nitong gerang ito? Specifically sa main source natin ng coal sa Indonesia.
May konti pong pagtaas na nakita doon sa tinatawag nating NUC or Newcastle Index. As of last check ko po siguro mga last week, wala pa namang paggalaw doon sa tinatawag nating ICI or Indonesian Coal Index. Kung saan tama po si Sir Ronald, doon kinukuha almost 100% of our imported coal. So hindi ko pa lang po na-check ulit kasi ngayon everyday gumagalaw talaga, kailangan mong bantayan yung merkado. But it's not directly linked to what's happening in the oil indices.
Ma'am, balik ko lang yung tanong ni Ami, but let me attack it from a different point of view or different perspective. I can imagine kasi a lot of people, drawing the parallel, parang yung suspension ng WESM para yung katumbas ng suspension ng oil regulation law. Kung saan
I guess it's also in the framing of the announcement kasi na this is to help.
Kaya tinatanong ko eh.
Oo,
Yeah.
this
Kasi
is
yun
to
ang inaasahan ng mga tao eh.
Yun po,
Oo.
yun ang i-connect ng mga tao, or people who, the layman will think that way.
Yeah.
Yung unlearned.
What's the best way to explain to them exactly what is happening in
Or what
those
to
terms?
expect.
Sa pronouncement, based sa pronouncement.
Opo. I think ang klaro ay yun yung desired effect na umabot sa atin as consumers yung pag-temper sa announcement na to or sa issuance na to, umabot sa atin yung intention ng gobyerno na ma-temper yung effect. Ang tanong nga lang ay will it produce that desired effect? Kasi nga, kung ang sitwasyon ay nakakontrata naman karamihan, pero ang kinokontrol mo, ang tinetemper mo yung market price, paano po maitatawid yung pagkontrol sa market price sa pagkontrol dun sa napakalaking porsyento, which is the contracted price? Siguro po yun yung kailangan nating itawid or kailangan ng ERC, ng DOE na itawid po para talagang makita yung ma-achieve yung desired effect ng issuance na ito.
Or kung sakali, sinong aako noong balanse between the contracted and tama ko ba?
Yun din po. Tama po. Kasi syempre yung generator, magbabayad din siya ng panggatong niya. Paano niya mababayaran yung panggatong niya?
Yeah.
Based on your experience, attorney, in times of crisis, although of course I know you didn't complete your term, pero what are yung players sa WESM na to, both the seller side, which is the power generators, power plants, at saka yung buyer side, which is yung distribution utilities, are they, what are they like working, what's it like working with them? Are they generally amenable to recommendations, to adjustments, to requests from the government?
I think in situations like this, we had a similar situation in 2022, if you
Ayaw
recall.
pala.
The start of the Ukraine war
Yes,
and
Yeah.
the Indonesian coal ban, temporary though it was at that time. So we had a similar situation. I think everybody has that cooperative stance in general. But I think reality also, reality bites, as they say, kailangan ng pambayad ng generator, nung fuel na inaangkat niya para mapatakbo yung planta niya. So kung iko-control natin, suppress natin yung price, tatanungin ni generator, o sige, makikisama ako, pero paano ko po babayaran yung utang ko naman dun sa supplier? And there were ways that were explored before, the deferred pricing, deferred charging mechanisms, all these things. So yung mga paraan na pwede nating magamit. WESM suspension has always been there, but as I mentioned earlier, iba po kasi yung triggers dati. It's the lack of generation.
Yeah.
That was the trigger before.
So almost similar din sa oil problem because there's only one refining plant here as well.
On another point, Attorney, kanina kasing umaga nakasabay ko si Attorney Leiko. Ang sabi niya ay itong National State of Energy Emergency ay una, too little too late. At ikalawa, hindi ganun ka-comprehensive kung inunuance mo na iba yung crisis sa pricing, iba yung crisis sa supply, at iba yung crisis sa economy. Ang dami masyadong nuancing, no?
Daming crisis wala nga crisis eh.
Kasi crisis is a crisis kaysa
Oo
sa...
nga, iba
Yes,
crisis ka ng
crisis is a
crisis.
crisis.
Walang
Emergency na
crisis.
lang.
Ang hirap mag-nuance. So, nakakalito sa mga tao. May emergency ba o wala? Parang ganon. At ano yung laman? Ano yung substance nung declared state of energy emergency? At ano yung mga proposals? Kaya, from your vantage point, anong tingin nyo? Nag-agree ba kayo kay Attorney Laiko na medyo masyadong nuance yung declaration?
I think to a certain extent po, kasi hindi natin kita doon sa EO kung ano ba talaga yung mga plano. But what I think was clear in the EO is a recognition that something needs to be done urgently. But what that something is, medyo nakaabang pa po tayo kung ano talaga yung gagawin. Kaya nga siguro ito pong nilabas ng ERC, medyo kailangan ding the details still need to be sorted out because even the EO from which it springs wala ding masyadong detalye. So to that extent, I agree po dun sa statement na nuanced naman talaga siya. Nuanced yung sitwasyon. I don't think there has ever been before a declaration of national energy emergency. Parang first time po yata ito.
What other mechanisms for controlling prices would work in this instance without, fully, nationalizing the energy industry, the electricity industry? I'm not suggesting that, by the way.
Why not?
Because of course, right now, off the back of this oil crisis, there's a lot of calls now. There's a bill making its way through Senate to re-regulate the oil industry. What about the power industry?
What do you don't like about nationalization?
The politicians. Go ahead, attorney.
Oo nga.
I think it's expected that there will be that reaction of how about let's just go back to the past. But it's because it's easy to forget what was in the past that drove us to where we are now, right? Because it was also the inability to sustain that kind of arrangement that led us to deregulation and privatization. So I think the question is, if we go back to the past, has the condition changed that triggered the departure from that past. Kaya na po ba natin, afford na po ba natin as a government to go back to nationalization? If not, ano po yung ibang pwede pa nating magawa? Like better, I suppose, better safety nets, instead of just declaring, for example, a full privatization or full deregulation. Are there scalpel approaches rather than a bludgeon approach, which is, I think, what a bludgeon type of arrangement that we have right now. Like all of a sudden, every aspect of the industry is privatized and deregulated. But we need to talk
Yan ang
about
suggestion ng iba. Attorney, hybrid. Give the government some elbow room to intervene kung sakasakaling ganitong merong hindi crisis, this non-crisis, o di kung merong energy emergency.
Pero di ba,
Yan po
attorney,
yung suggestion ng iba. You think that's workable?
Pero di ba,
That's
attorney,
workable, hybrid.
sa ating oil deregulation law, meron namang clause doon for government intervention in times of emergency or crisis.
No, Section 14.
Oh, nakalagay yun
Yes.
sa ating even and
Yes.
all, hindi absolute yung deregulation. No? So, halimbawa, ngayon, kung talagang grabe yung crisis at saka yung emergency, ay pwede mag-intervene talaga. Actually, theoretically, pwedeng i-take over ng gobyerno yung ating oil industry. Nakalagay yun doon sa law mismo.
Yes.
Oo, short of that.
Tama,
Kasi
Sir
ayaw ng
Ronald.
Malacanang yan eh.
Opo, kasi
Sinabi
po,
ng Malacanang ayaw nila mag-take over.
yes, I think yung una kasi dyan, once you do a takeover, you really spook investors with a takeover. Second, kaya po ba? Kaya bang puntahan ng gobyerno lahat nung, for example, in the downstream oil industry, kaya ba niyang i-operate yung lahat ng gas stations and even the refinery? Or does that mean anong klase pong arrangement yung magkakaroon if ever there's a takeover? I think those are the practical questions that need to be addressed also if government wants to trigger those draconian provisions in the laws.
Actually, that can be used as a threat para yung mga big players ay i-absorb nyo naman partially itong increases na ito. Wag lang laging pass on sa consumers. That can be used as a threat na ayaw namin ng draconian measure na ito. Pero kung yung ayaw nyong bawasan yung billions of dollars na kinikita nyo at lahat pasa lang sa consumers, lahat tayo tatamaan. Tatamaan kami, tatamaan din kayo. So, parang ganun lang eh. Kaya siguro isang dahilan para nilagay yun doon, not necessarily para i-implement. Pero at least, it's a message sa oil companies na tulong-tulong naman tayo rito.
Pero kung sakali nga, anong pwede kung gagawin ng hybrid? Ano yung workable, yung pwedeng i-implement nga ng gobyerno? Ano yung pwede?
In the fuel sector po, for example, the tension actually arises aside from the private sector, the private car owners, for example, feeling that brunt, the middle class, which I think needs a different solution. But for the public transport sector, ang tension po nagmumula dun sa fact that deregulated yung fuel, pero yung taripa niya regulated. So palagi siyang naiipit dun sa gitna na ako na lang ba ng ako ang mag-absorb nung taas ng fuel on the part of the jeepney operator, taxi driver, bus operator. Dun po nagmumula yung tension. Baka naman pwede na yung fuel supply dun sa public transport sector regulated din. Para po kung i-keep natin, kung iiwan natin na regulated yung taripa. Kasi po may disconnect eh. Deregulated yung raw material nila, which is the fuel, but regulated yung price ng pagbenta nila, ng service nila, which is the tariff. It will always create this tension. On the power side, mas komplikado po yung usapan kasi mas komplikado yung value chain ng power sector. I think long-term solution there is really a migration from our current fuel sourcing, which is very dependent on imported fuel, to other sources, either renewable or indigenous, other indigenous sources. Yun po yung nakikita kong solusyon doon.
Coming back to the suspension of the WESM, the Wholesale Electricity Spot Market, attorney, the other thing the ERC said that it will implement a modified pricing mechanism. So coal plants will be paid at fixed rates and natural gas plants will be paid based on their contracts. I think this speaks to what you were saying earlier na a lot of them are contracted already. Help us understand what the logic here is about yung coal plants being paid at fixed rates and natural gas plants at the contract prices. Bakit kailangan ng modified administered pricing mechanism?
Yun din po yung gusto ko din pong maintindihan.
Okay.
Kasi po, although admittedly the 6 pesos, if we base it only on the WESM prices for the last 4 weeks, the 6 pesos is quite generous. The average WESM price has been hovering around below 6 pesos. At least in Luzon, it has been around 4 pesos. I think in Visayas and Mindanao, the situation is a bit different. We saw certain spikes over the last few days in Mindanao in particular.
Generous for whom?
Generous
for the
generators.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that's why where the 6 pesos comes from will need to be explained or will need to be sorted out. So is it really just, maybe it's driven by that desire to have stable prices,
Supply.
wag ka nang gumalaw. Sige, bibigay ko na sa yung 6 pesos, wag ka na gumalaw. Baka naman po ganon. But we need to see the basis for the 6 pesos also.
Kaya lang, if it's generous, of course, then
It's not very generous for us.
it's not very generous for consumers. Sino magbe-bear
So para
ng-
kung what you're saying is, medyo mataas, on the high side siya, I don't know if that's the right word for it, pero nga, on the other hand, baka that's a trade-off para we have a more stable, ganun ba?
So they'll keep
Stable supply.
Baka.
They keep producing.
they keep generating para ma-ensure yung stability of the supply.
Dali namang ipaliwanag ng gano'n yan. Dali namang ipaliwanag yan. Kahit onerous yung terms.
Onerous.
Sabi mo, we're helping you, we're stabilizing. Di ba?
Sa bagay. Kaya lang, as attorney explained earlier, I mean, the coal imports is also, I mean, there's a question there, what if the war drags on, let's say, months, knock on wood, hopefully not, pero we have to face that possibility. And then what happens to the coal imports? Diba?
I think the more critical question here is how is this suspension pricing really intends to work? Does it supplant the contracted pricing? In which case medyo tumatawid na po tayo, hindi lang yung merkado yung pinapakailaman natin, pati yung kontrata yung presyo sa kontrata na yung pinapakailaman natin. So I think those things will need to be sorted out, and then we can talk about whether it's a fair price or not. But fundamentally, I think we need to understand how this is designed to work to reach that objective of cushioning the impact on the consumer.